Hi folks, I'm Rob Flux and this is a brand new series called Open Mic Night. The whole concept being that we're going to go live and get you guys to ask me the questions, and I'm just going to wing it and go with the flow and see if I can actually help you guys along the way. Now, through the magic of the interwebs, I'm actually transferring out this to 4 different channels. So we're going to our Facebook page, we're going to our Facebook group, we're going to our LinkedIn channel, and also to YouTube. So depending upon where you are, if you chat into that window, hopefully I will see your comments. Now, if that's not the case, then the best thing that you can actually do is jump onto our Facebook page or our group, and there is a tiny little click. And if you click on this little URL here, anything that you chat will come to me and I'll get to see your name, who you are, that sort of thing. And I can feature your question on the page. And more importantly, if it's a really good question, I'll send you a little private message and you can actually jump onto the live and we can actually have a little bit of banter back and forth. So that's the whole idea. So having a look out there, I'm seeing that there's a lot of people saying, hi, Rob, but not many people asking any questions at the moment. So what I'm really looking for is for you guys to say, hey, Rob, give me a question. Now looking to see what chats are actually coming through, see if I can find something. Number of people that were telling me that my sound wasn't working, so thank you. Specifically, Charlie, who was very, very quick on the feeds, telling me that. Question time, folks. I've got 14 of you sitting in here, so if you don't, I'm just going to start telling you stuff that I want to talk about rather than things that you want to hear. So Shelley says hi. Hi, Shelley. How are you? I guess. Whilst I'm waiting for people to actually ask me a question, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we've coming up in the next couple of weeks. So clearly, for those of you who've been hanging around for a little while, we've been talking about a half-day event which is running on this weekend, and that is called Escape Velocity. So if anyone is wanting to come to that, I can give you some links to that in a couple of moments. But I do have my first question. My first question is come through from Justin. See if I can actually get Justin's question up on the screen. Hasn't yet appeared. So give me 2 seconds, Justin, and I should, hopefully that should come through in a sec. Actually, that's coming through from a different channel, so it might not appear here. So Justin's got a question. Hi, Rob. If using a private lender for finance and a 12-month settlement, what are the ways to mitigate the risk of losing your deposit if the lender doesn't assess your deal as being profitable enough, or is it too conservative in the valuation of the end product? Okay, let me just try and digest that a little bit, Justin. So if you're using a private lender, so when you say private, is that an individual or is that actually a commercial lender, as in a non-bank? Okay, because what you should be doing is getting a subject to finance type clause, making sure that you've actually got that finance approval live before you actually go unconditional on the loan. I wouldn't be doing that under any circumstances, going unconditional if you haven't got your finance locked in. Now, if the lender doesn't assess your deal as being profitable enough, or is it too conservative? I guess whether or not they deem it to be profitable enough, I guess, is why you would actually have the subject to finance type clause, Justin. So now I'm assuming when you're talking about private lender in that instance, you're talking about non-bank lending or commercial lending. Those guys are a little bit more creative in how they assess their deals. They tend to have slightly higher interest rates and slightly higher I guess, equity components or deposit components actually looking in, but they very much care about the profitability of the deal. They also care about, I guess, your experience in actually running the deal. So I guess hoping that helps you in that realm, but what they don't care so much about is your serviceability. So they move away from the residential lending space. They don't care about serviceability. They look at the deal itself. So hence to your question, if it's not profitable enough, well, if it's not profitable enough, they're going to deem that's too much risk. And what they may do is ask you to put more equity in, or they may ratchet up the rate. They're the 2 options that you've got, or they may turn it down. But if you've got that subject to finance clause, that will get you there. I've got a question from John Constable. So John says, Rob, with so many empty apartments and house prices so high, what's the future of the Australian real estate What is the future of Australian real estate when we have more properties than people? John, mate, you have fallen into my trap. That is exactly what I'm going to be talking about on our half-day event on the weekend. So the event is called Escape Velocity. And rather than me try to do it justice by answering here, what I would say is I'm spending 4 whole hours talking about it, talking about both market indicators, which is telling you what has actually happened, and market drivers, which is telling you where our market is actually going. So highly recommend you come into that. And as a matter of fact, what I will do, just because you asked the question so nicely, that link on your screen right there, if you follow that, you can register for that. It is on Saturday. It is from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturday. So half-day event, free to come, and I'll cover that in a huge amount of detail. Other than to say, it's the oversupply that you're talking about may not necessarily be as bad as what you're thinking. So I'll leave that as a little fishhook for you, mate. Okay, so Luke says, what's the easiest way to become familiar with your local desired council LEP/rules? So the fact that you're referring to LEP, Luke, is telling me that you're in New South Wales because the terminology there is very specific. But everything is actually online, mate. So firstly, make sure you've locked in what your development strategy is so you know exactly what you're looking for. And all of the councils in New South Wales follow an exact framework. So everything's laid out in a very particular way. Once you become familiar with one council, you'll become familiar with all of them. So you've got every council will publish on their own website, I guess, a link to their LEPs and their DCPs, so their local environmental plans and their development control plans. But also the state government also has a register for all of that as well. So you can actually go to the New South Wales planning portal and every single council will have everything on there. So you can go to either or. What I do find is that the local councils will give you a little bit of extra information, extra bit of background that's going to help you massively. Quite often they'll help you in building your cheat sheets and a few things like that because they'll have some tips and tricks and that sort of thing as to how to work well with their council. So hoping that helps, mate. Jack says, and what I'm noticing, guys, is your questions are only coming through on one window and not another. So I'm learning how to dance here with this new technology. Jack says, if you could only choose one state to residentially develop in at the moment, which would it be and why? Okay, Jack, that's a loaded question, but I'm going to say it's the state that you are based in, wherever that is. You want to make sure that your developments are geographically convenient for you to actually go and visit. So not sure where you're based, but there is plenty of opportunities all around Australia. As a matter of fact, the 4 largest places where there are the most amount of opportunities, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth. So if you're in any of those 4 places, there is oodles of opportunity because you only need one deal, mate. Why go to all that extra effort and all the extra expense and all the extra risk of trying to manage a deal remotely when you can do a deal that's going to be just as profitable just around the corner and be very, very convenient? So, that's what I would say. Now, that said, there are a lot of people running away from Sydney and Melbourne and running all the way to Queensland at the moment. So there's a short-term uplift that's going to happen there with the Olympics. There's also going to be, I guess, a longer-term uplift. But post-Olympics, nobody knows what's going to happen at that point. But that's 10 plus years away, mate. So if you want to roll the dice and go, I'm going to choose one, I'd be moving to, Brisbane for the more opportunities. But I would say that Sydney and Melbourne and Perth all have just as many opportunities and no point running away unless you absolutely need to. Okay. Jack has got a follow-up question that says, where would you develop though? Where would I develop? Well, I'm based in Brisbane, so that's where I largely do that. That said, I am negotiating on a couple of sites in Sydney because I travel enough that does make it geographically convenient for me from time to time when I'm not locked out. So pretty much Brisbane being my home place, that's where I do most of my developments though. Okay, I've got a few questions coming a few different places. So this is interesting, trying to dance when you're publishing to 4 different platforms, you get answers coming in 4 different directions. So let's see where we go with this. So if I missed somebody's questions, I humbly apologize. Okay, so humbly apologize. I'm just trying to see who's got a question I haven't asked. Okay, I've got some coming through from one channel where I've got no name, so I don't know who the name is here. How much should a potential subdivision site be discounted if it's sitting on a main road? Something 6+ lanes, yellow coloured roads on maps, on Google Maps. That is a how long is a piece of string question, whoever that Facebook user is. Can't get to see your name. What you've really got to do is try and look at your comparables for the area. So I guess you're going to be buying cheaper, but you're also going to be selling cheaper as well. So I'd be looking up and down that everything that's actually facing that that road, seeing what the comparable sales are onto that road. It's very difficult to work out what the level of discount would be. Having said that, being a 6-lane road, it is going to be quite busy. It is going to be such a little bit of a thoroughfare. You're going to struggle with a couple of elements of the deal that you need to factor in over and above what you should actually discount it. So firstly, being a main road, constructing the project in the first place is going to require a whole bunch of people doing traffic management. So you're going to have lollipop ladies sitting out the front with their little posts telling you that you can come and go and when you can do that and that sort of thing. That's going to be impacted during peak hours if that's a thoroughfare for people getting in and out of work. So that can actually be quite expensive in actually trying to manage the project and actually construct that. It's also going to inhibit how much traffic can actually come on and off of the site. So chances are you're only going to be allowed one driveway in and one driveway out. Which means that may impact the design and hence the functionality of the outcome you're actually going for. So a couple of elements there. I would make sure that you definitely discount for the extra cost in actually doing that. Also, the fact that almost certainly, if it is a state-based road, you're also going to have to refer to that state-based agency to get their approval to do your development, what they call a referral agency. So the timelines for your project could take a little bit longer. So factor that in for a holding cost perspective. Now, how much? I can't tell you exactly how much I'd actually discount it by, but what I would be doing is being very, very careful with my due diligence to look at other people that have done similar projects along that stretch of road. And if you can't find other people that have done that, then it's a little bit speculative as to what you're actually doing. So if it's speculative, that is equivalent to being gambling. So if you like gambling and you want to put it all on 26 red, that is completely up to you, but that's not my guidance in doing that. Okay, now because I've got a few different places with questions, please excuse me while I try this. Okay. Do you offer consulting and or project management services to help out first-time developers? I'm looking at small townhouse development deals. So regrettably, because of the size of my community, I don't have the bandwidth to be able to do one-on-one consulting. Instead, what I do is an education and mentoring program where I can give that one-on-one support between myself and my team to actually support people through that journey. If that is something of interest, then the program is called Property Development Formula. If you look on our website, you'll be able to find that quick, smart, and more than happy to have a chat to you about that. I do, I guess, the one-on-one consulting as part of that, but I don't do it outside of that. Now, with regards to do I do joint ventures, absolutely I do joint ventures, but I do try where humanly possible to have those joint ventures with an arm's length distance between me and any student. So I wouldn't do a joint venture with a student. I want to make sure that student is able to do that on their own 2 feet. That's, I guess, the whole point of that process. So hoping that does help you and points you in the right direction. If you go and have a look for our Property Development Formula program, have a look and see whether or not that fits what you're looking for. Next question. What is the best place to buy cheap acreage for subdivision development in 5 years' time? Okay, Being Australia is a very, very big place, I can't tell you the exact spot, but what I can tell you is that there are clues and breadcrumb trails that are left by every single state government that are telling you how and where they want to see the population grow. And if you start looking at your state government strategic plans as to where they want to see populations go, you can start to speculate on where those areas would be. That said, if you're looking at a 5+ year horizon, that is a land banking investment strategy, whereas what we do here is we do property development, and what we're looking for is more the short-term manufactured growth side of things. So if you want to be speculative, go read those state government strategic plans as to where the city is growing. Have a look at what infrastructure they're putting in place in order to enable that population growth to get there. So hoping that helps whoever that particular user is. Got a question from Vijan, says, G'day Rob, how does private banking is different to normal banking? Good question, Vijan. So let's break it down a little bit further, because people use the term private banking, I guess, and private lenders a little bit loosely. So I'm just going to tighten that up for you, okay? So we have typical commercial banks, okay? So we are, residential banks, I should say. So that is when you're going to buy a property that's got a long-term 20 to 30 year plus horizon. We then have non-bank lenders, who most people might refer to as private lenders, where they deal specifically in the commercial/construction element of the deal. And then we have true private lenders, who might be high net worth individuals who may lend to you. Now, depending upon where you're going, depends on whether or not you're actually coming under APRA regulations, which is the Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority, or ASIC regulations, which is the Australian Securities Investment Corporation, or alternatively, are you bypassing those altogether? Okay. Now, there are certain risks in, going down those paths. There are a little bit more, as you get further and further away from the big banks, the interest rates get a little bit more expensive. The amount of equity that you need in the deal gets a little bit higher, but they become much, much more flexible in allowing you to do deals that the big banks might deem to be a little bit too risky. So you've got to balance the flexibility of being able to move forward on your deal versus the cost of actually doing that. So it is a little bit of a balance. Hoping that helps. Declan says, hey Rob, been looking forward to this all week. Hopefully more open mic nights to come. Hoping so too, Declan, if I can do the dance as to how to manage all of this, mate. There's so many things coming back and forth. It is a little bit tricky. Luke says 7,000 people moved to Queensland in March 2021 quarter. Absolutely, mate. At the moment, I guess Southeast Queensland is hot because a lot of people are seeing that we've been able to, through the borders, the really, really aggressive border lockdowns, which is killing some businesses, but allowing others that are internal to actually stay afloat. That's actually made it very attractive for interstate, specifically Melbourne and Sydney, people to actually want to come here. So there's been a lot of people coming here over and above normal. But then again, we just recently had a lockdown as well. So will that change now that it's crossing the borders a little bit more often? Who's to know, mate? But we do have a number of other major big projects coming up, which is going to be great for bringing jobs. The Olympics in particular is going to be a huge one for actually attracting people here. That said, there are still plenty of opportunities in Sydney and plenty of opportunities in Melbourne as well. Okay, going to go over to this platform and see if I can get some questions from there. How much less? That's only half a question. I think it's tied to another question that went up. What is the best place to buy cheap acreage? I think I've covered that one. Next one, finding it tricky to get into a deal in Brisbane for my strategy. What's your opinion on doing this strategy in regional areas? Not knowing what your strategy is, you didn't actually comment on what that was, I'm sorry. And because I can't see your name, I can't see if you followed that up in another part of the thread. If you are in Facebook land, if you could help me massively, and if you follow this link that I've just put on the screen, what it will do is it will actually give me your name when you chat into the chat window, and that way I can try and follow the threads. That would be fantastic. So if you go to chat.restream.io/FB, that way I'll actually get to see your names. So that would be awesome. Peter says, that's a statement rather than a question, so I'm going to leave that. Adam says, hi, Rob. What is your prediction with population post-COVID movement? Will CBDs return to their former glory, or will office buildings have opportunities to repurpose them? Adam, I'm going to say both, mate. So we are going through a little bit of a shift in, I guess, expectations in how the workplace is actually going to work. There's going to be a number of things that are going to change over the next 2 or 3 years. Our employers have worked out that we can actually exist doing remote commuting. However, they also know that we're a little bit more productive when we are together. So there's going to be a little bit more flexibility in the workplace. Absolutely. There's going to be some changes in the kind of products that we create. So there's going to be more homes that have what is loosely being called a Zoom room. So somewhere where you can actually have an office space and private and not impact the entire house. But that's going to leave some of our CBD a little bit short with regards to existing commercial uses. So there will be opportunities to repurpose those buildings for sure. Now, a lot of the things, office spaces being converted into hotels, hotels being converted into office spaces, those sorts of things. Potentially, I guess, short stay accommodations, all sorts of things like that. So there is absolutely going to be some repurposing of that. The commercial world, I think, is going to be more impacted than the residential world, only because of the fact that businesses starting and stopping, working out that they can actually keep transacting online. Maybe they don't actually need a shop front anymore. So I think there's going to be a lot more impact in the commercial space rather than the residential space. I will be covering quite a bit of that at our half-day event on the weekend, Escape Velocity, mate. So if you're interested in that, I'll go into that in a lot more detail. Okay, next question. In this current hot market, am I too pessimistic as I can't find a good deal where I can make some money? I'm in Melbourne. Okay, so not knowing what you're looking for nor what your criteria is, absolutely it's a hot market. However, the market is softening. And what you need to understand is how much will it soften, how long will it soften, and when is it going to start coming back? Now, when you start to factor those things in, you can then measure that against, well, my project's going to take some time. So will that downwards movement mean that I'm getting out of my deal at the bottom of the market? Or will that mean that the next upward slope means that I'm actually starting to pick that up on the next wave up? Okay. Now, I've been giving some hints as we've gone over the last couple of weeks in trying to promote my event on the weekend, in that I think there's a second wave. Okay. So right now we are in a hot market for sure, and it is slowing down, but I think there's a second wave, and I'm going to go into all the reasons why I think that's the case. Your question needs to really be a little bit of a smarter question, and that is, will the timing of that down and up align with the timeline it takes me to run my project, and will the planets align? Okay, so if you can get that right, then there's no reason why you can't get deals in the current market. Will it be harder? Absolutely. But is it impossible? Absolutely not. Okay. Any other questions? John's got a question here. I heard a company that is adjusting wages as staff working from home, lower wages, less super, add pressures, bills, mortgages, etc. I can't speak on, I guess, the wage side of things, other than to say that there is absolutely our HR policies in Australia are very, very tight on what you can and can't pay for people. And there are minimum commitments that you must pay. Unless somebody has been demoted and that sort of thing, I'm not aware of any reason why you can actually just give someone a pay cut. Unless the role has changed, unless they are no longer doing the same job. But that said, I'm not a HR person, I'm a property person. So I would be talking to people like the Chamber of Commerce to see whether or not that is actually legal or appropriate. But I wouldn't be stressing too much on that with regards to how and what you're doing on the property front. Okay, looking for more questions to come through. And what I would desperately love, guys, is if you did follow that link for me, that would help me massively with who's actually asking some of these questions. Everything is just coming through saying Facebook user, so I don't know who I'm talking to in some instances. Sometimes I can see individual people and other times I can't. So we're 27 minutes in and have covered quite a bit of ground. Who else has got something, I guess, controversial? I love controversy. Bueller? Is it just me that knows Ferris? Clint's got a question. Hey, Rob, how would you navigate through a market that is asking for a high purchase price for land along with the building costs rising without the price of the end product growing at the same rate as the land? Clint, that is almost an identical question answer to what I just covered before. The trick to that is really knowing, I guess, when the down and up cycle is actually occurring. The cost of construction has gone through the roof lately, and largely because, I guess, anything that we're importing from overseas, the cost of just the shipping containers has nearly quadrupled in the last 6 months. The cost of timber has gone through the roof because, one, locally, we used to be very, very self-sufficient, but locally we had a whole bunch of bushfires, which then made the production of that quite challenging. Overseas, the demand has gone through the roof for timber, and so we've got the few amount of local supplies in timber that we've got actually more attractive to send overseas and sell overseas than it is to actually supply the Australian market. So it can actually be very tricky in actually understanding that. That said, I did do quite a big piece on this 2 Sunday sessions ago with regards to, I guess, the impact of that with builders potentially going broke. So, there's not just us in our deals that are actually being impacted. There's actually businesses, building businesses and their families being impacted as well. So we've got to work with our builders to actually go, well, how do we actually navigate this through? Okay. Now, with regards to the end product, which was really where your question was, we've got to understand what is the demand coming for that particular group. So understand the difference between an indicator, which tells you what has happened, and a driver, which is telling you where your market is going. Now, if you know what your market drivers are, you can start to predict whether or not there's going to be an upswing in price points in your little area. So I'm going to go through that in massive detail on the weekend when we go through the Escape Velocity event. So I might throw that link up again. So where is the link for? There it is. So if you have not yet registered for the half-day event, then do that. And I'll go into that in a lot of detail as to how to actually read where that market is actually going, so you can then factor that into your risk profile. So hoping that helps, mate. Next question, go to one of the other channels. What's going to drive the second wave? There's a combination of things that are going to drive the second wave, and it really comes down to when we had the first dip in the market going back at the start of COVID. All of the developers were going, whoa, we don't know where the market is going to drop to. We had banks predicting anywhere between a 20 and 30% drop in the market. And so a whole bunch of people went, well, I'm not going to get in and do a development. And so they just stopped doing development applications. So there's a massive hole in I guess, supply that's actually starting to come through. Then the government did a whole bunch of building boosts or building grants that just consumed all of the existing development applications that were sitting there. So now we've got a lack of applications that have been approved, and we've got a whole bunch of latent supply that's now being consumed. Okay, now because of that lull, there's a great big window that's going through where that lack of supply is eventually going to start to hit us and start to impact us. And when that's going to start to impact us is when our population growth starts to happen. And when our population growth starts to happen is when they start to open the borders up. So will it happen just yet? No, but it is going to happen. So that's part of what we're going to cover on that on the event on the weekend, and I'll go into that in a lot more detail. Hoping that helps, mate. Lynn says, sorry, I think I may have missed a couple of questions. So Justin says, if you have a 12-month settlement subject to finance, would the vendor accept? Question mark. Isn't it too much risk for them that finance falls through after 11 months and then they are left hangling with the sale 11 months after it's paused? So Justin, that's a multifaceted question. Okay, so I'm going to try and break it down into its pieces. So firstly, don't assume that anyone's going to just refuse anything unless and until you ask. Okay, what is way more important is you don't just put something in front of the vendor and hope that they take it, but rather you get to understand the vendor and go, what is the circumstances that they are actually selling the property for? Why are they selling it? I guess the underlying reason why, to see what is actually motivating the sale. And if the motivation of the sale is high enough, then they may actually let you put together an offer like that because it's going to be in their best interests. They might want the highest price point humanly possible, in which case they may give you the time to order to do that. They may, it may not be hurting them at all from a holding cost perspective. And they might recognize the fact that if you don't get the, the finance, that you've gone and put a development application on their property, which is A, avoided them cost, and B, uplifted the value of their property. So if you can articulate that well enough to them to say, well, even if I don't get through, you're still going to be better off, then if their driver is correct, then that might align for them anyway. The key thing is understand their drivers and don't just force your solution down their throat. But if you understand their drivers, you can match the exact offer to them. So hoping that helps. Another Facebook user. Hi, mate. I'm a new investor developer and have been hearing a lot about private funding being quite risky as a hope you will fail. So if you can't pay for funding at the end of the construction, will they take it off you? How do you de-risk this? Sell off the plan or try to get an investor instead of private funding? So what I would say, and I'm sorry I don't know your name here, what I would say is, are there sharks out there in the private lending space? And the answer is absolutely categorically there are. That said, there are plenty that are not, okay? And so what you've got to be able to do is do your due diligence on that lender to actually work out, are they going to be trying to force you into a position where you're inevitably going to fail, or are they actually trying to assist you and enable you to actually get in and out of the deal? Now, the good funders are going to help you through the process rather than try to hurt you, and they recognize that repeat business is far better off than trying to, monetize, a couple of people that they fail. So make sure you do your homework on your lender. Make sure you've got referrals from other people that have actually used them. Make sure your solicitor reads the terms and conditions of the contract, okay? And if it's really one-sided in their favor, be very, very cautious in actually going into that deal. So hoping that helps. Next one. Have you ever sold a development to a fund? I might have a fund that will finance me to build and purchase the development outright. Have you seen this before? When you say a fund, there are a couple of different kinds of funds out there. So there's institutional lending that specializes in lending into the development space. Typically, you would be selling the finished product into them. So they would have a very specific niche. So it might be that they are in childcare, or it might be that they are in commercial. They have a very specific niche that they are looking for. And if you happen to create the right stock for them, they are a guaranteed exit strategy for you. So absolutely, those people do exist. Have I used them? No, not to date. Hoping that one day I can get a guaranteed exit strategy before I buy a property. That would be very, very handy. But they do exist, so know that they do. There are other funds that just specialize in not taking the finished product, but rather just funding you all the way through. And they're not really interested in owning the stock at the end, but rather just helping you to actually transact that. So a couple of different ways that can actually be done. Have you got any experience in SDA, Specialist Disability Accommodation builds in terms of develop to sell? Have I got experience? The question is, I have not done any. Have I investigated and have I done a whole bunch of work? The answer is absolutely. I've done a bucket load. The biggest challenge with, I guess, anything in the NDIS space, which is really where this sits, is that the statistics on the demand are not really accurate. And so it's a very, very speculative play. You don't really know if the product that you are creating has a high amount of demand in the area that you actually are creating it. And so it's a very speculative play. Now, that said, if you get it right, it is very lucrative as well. But noting that you only have a small number of people that can potentially take up your product, if too much supply comes into an area, it is very easy to become saturated. And because the cost of the build is much, much higher, it is a little bit more challenging to ensure that you actually get your stock out. So by working with an SDA, as you've touched on, they are the people who bring, I guess the clients to you to actually rent the property. And if they have a large supply of potential clients for you, then you may be able to de-risk that. So that would be my clue, is to work with your SDA provider to go, okay, how many people have you got in this area with this level of disability looking for product right now, and what is my market competitors doing at this point in time, and see if that supply and demand curve don't conflict way too much, mate. Hoping that helps. Lynn says, just finished finalising design for a Class 1B building. Do you have any tips for finding good agents for the management of same? Okay, so when we're referencing a Class 1B dwelling, that is functionally the ability to multi-let, so rent per room, and have multiple people on multiple leases within the property. Okay, so Class 1B is a National Construction Code classification when you have multiple leases on the one property. Now, when you've got multiple leases in the one property, that means that you've got people that have dedicated space to themselves and also shared space. So how they interact with each other is actually quite important. So any property manager who specializes in normal rentals will not really understand the fact that people sharing space, sharing common areas and that sort of thing are going to interact in slightly different ways. And so I would be looking for people who specialize just in that rent per room space, and that's pretty much all they do. So they know how to set the house rules, they know how to manage the house rules, they know that the slight differences and idiosyncrasies in the relevant local state laws with regards to the Tenancies Act, which will be slightly different in each state. And so there's typically only 4 or 5 providers in one geography area that specialize in that sort of product. So you've got a minimal amount of people to actually go to, which means that you should be able to quickly find someone that fits your palatability on management style. That said, be very, very careful with a couple of hidden costs in doing these, particularly around the insurance and fire safety management side of things. There are some ongoing liabilities with regards to having monthly fire management plans put in place that you have to keep the property maintained, and also the fact that you've got to pay for a higher insurance premium when you've got multiple people on multiple leases. So hoping that helps, Lynn. Sorry, very itchy nose, guys. Next question. Following on question regarding private lender, what terms would differ a bad private lender from a good private lender? My name is Humphrey. Hello, Humphrey. What would differentiate them? All of the lenders are going to try and protect themselves with the ability to, I guess, take over the project or take over the loan in some way, shape, or form if you default. The challenge that you're going to have is what triggers a default, and how close are they putting you to the line so that day one you're set up for that failure. Okay, so if you think that your project is going to take 9 months to run, for example, and they say at month 10 it triggers a default if you haven't paid us back, that's really, really close. If, on the other hand, they give you 6 months leeway in order to pay them back because they understand that sales cycles can take a little bit of while, that sort of thing, if they're a little bit more flexible on their terms with regards to what triggers the default, that's what I'd be caring about. And again, making sure that you do your reference checks to say, well, I'd like to speak to some people that you've actually funded previously, see the projects that they've actually completed, talk to them with regards to their experience and the like. Now, if they are decent lenders, they shouldn't have any problem at all in providing, I guess, those references. So hoping that points you in the right direction. Okay. Okay. Next question. Clint says, "Thanks. You're welcome, mate." Matthew says, "Do you have any more success finding deals by sending out letters or by going through agents?" Matthew, you need to do D, all of the above. Okay. You have a very different attack vector with each, and let me describe what that is. If you have a relationship with an agent, and the key word is relationship, then that is a gift that is going to keep on giving. It will take you a long time to build that relationship, but if you build and nurture that relationship, they'll bring you deals over and over and over forever. So you're not going to have to be farming forever. Instead, you've spent your energy fostering that relationship, and that will keep on giving. Okay. But that takes a while to foster that relationship. So it takes a while to fill that pipeline up of opportunities coming through. Letter drops, on the other hand, are more instantaneously. You send out letters and your hit rate is going to be based on, well, how many letters do I send out? The more activity you do, the more response that you're actually going to get. However, the moment you stop sending letters, it dries up. Okay, so if you don't keep sending letters, then that opportunity starts to dry. So what you need to do is both. You need to do the short-term activity to fill the pipe in the short term, and you need to do the long-term activity with regards to building the relationship with the agents so that you don't have to keep getting on the treadmill all the time, every single time. So do the multifaceted approach. Try some door knocking. Try some buyer's agents. Give some of your agents I guess some of the opportunities that you've already identified and get them to door knock on your behalf. Okay. The more attack vectors you can actually get in there, the more deals that actually come into your funnel, the more chance that you've actually got in a deal actually coming off. Okay. Hey, Trevor. Just wanted to say hi and that I'm enjoying this. Mate, you're welcome. Anytime. Miss you, buddy. Next question, John. You're loving it. Bye for the second wave, higher rents. That's replying to Luke. Okay, John. Luke is always buying. So I guess there's a difference in approach between a long-term buy and hold and a short-term development, guys. Okay. Luke is very good with his long-term buy and hold and helping people with their cash flow deals. So, if you're looking for that sort of thing, mate, if you're holding for the long term, it is always going to pay off. Whether it's a high point right now and there's a dip, it doesn't matter if you're hanging on for 10 or 15 years, it's always going to come back to you, okay? So, just understand what you're assessing your deal for, okay? When you're assessing your site, there's really only 4 ways to assess a site, okay? Are you doing this for a capital gain? Are you doing this for cash flow? Are you doing this for manufactured growth, or are you doing this for lifestyle? They're the only 4 reasons that you buy a property. So when you're assessing the property, you need to understand that you're assessing it for those 4 criteria, okay? So if you're buying it for long-term buy and hold, then look at the drivers that are going to drive the long-term capital growth, okay? If you are buying it for cash flow, then look at the drivers that are going to drive it for cash flow. And if instead you're looking at it for manufactured growth, then look at the drivers that are going to give you that manufactured growth that you're actually looking for. If you're buying it for lifestyle, well, you just want to be there because it's a nice place to live. So I guess money doesn't tend to come into it other than can I afford it in that instance. So next question. Declan says, build spec question. What are some of the internal spec differences in a low spec build versus a medium spec build in your view? Okay, that's a tricky one to answer, but I can answer it quite generically. Okay, the quality of the product. If you put a wall up, you're going to have to put a frame inside the wall and gyprock on the wall. So the wall itself probably not going to have huge amount of differences in cost, other than has somebody taken the time to make sure that wall is really, really straight. But the materials going into it are a little bit identical, whether it's a straight wall or a little bit of a wonky wall. So you might pay a labourer a small amount extra to make sure that that labourer is actually qualified. Then you go, well, what am I sticking on the wall? Okay, so what am I sticking on the floor? So the quality of those components. Am I putting a vinyl floor? Am I putting a ceramic tile, or am I putting a porcelain tile? Am I putting down marble? Okay, so as you start to go up in build quality, the feel of the product will be different. The durability of the product will be different, and when you walk into the property, the presence of the property will actually be very different. Okay, so when you start to layer those things together, when you say, well, I've got a floor, and then I've got a kitchen, and then I've got some taps, and then when you go cheap, the whole place feels cheap. Okay, whereas if you do a little bit of a blend, what you could do is to say, well, I might do a larger tile, but instead of it being a porcelain tile, I might make that ceramic tile. Okay, so it still looks good, but it's not the highest quality, but it looks pretty good. Okay, I might put a stone bench top, but instead of doing a 40 mil stone, I might only do a 20 mil stone. I might not put the waterfall on the end of that stone bench top. I might just do the top itself. So you can start to get a nice feel without spending huge amounts of money in order to make sure that you've upped everything. When you're upping everything, that's when it actually costs things. So be selective in what you do. Work with interior designers that are really good at understanding the feel of a property. What's it actually going to be like to actually walk in, and the presence? Okay, so the color selection, the material selection, all that sort of thing. If you get a really good combination, you can get a nice feel, a more expensive feel on a little bit more of a budget. Okay, so that's really the difference. Is really, I guess, when you walk in, what is the the intangible feel of the product. Okay, next question from Adam. Hi, Rob. What government incentives / changes do you foresee in the next 12 to 24 months that will affect the real estate development space? Adam, I don't see squat coming out of the government at the moment. They have spent so much money on government incentives in the last 18 months or so that they're in danger of almost sending themselves broke. Okay, now that's a bit of an exaggeration, but if you go back 2 years in time, the Treasurer and the Prime Minister were sprouting how they were about to be in the black. Okay, back in the black was the ad, so no debt at all. Now they came into COVID and they spent so much on infrastructure, so much on your building home builder grants, and so much on your job keeper and your job seeker and that sort of thing, that they are really billions of dollars into the hole at this point in time. And so they're trying to do what they can to keep the economy alive without overspending now. Okay, so now it's about maintenance mode as opposed to re-stimulating. The stimulus and the boom that we're in right now is an artificial boom because they spent all that money. They went and spent the money to manufacture jobs. Okay, so basically trying to keep people alive. They can't keep doing that forever, because eventually they need to pay the debt back. Okay, so I don't see that there's going to be huge amounts other than the existing projects that are already in the pipeline. So there are several projects that are billions of dollars in size and take 4 or 5 years to run that have now been started. So the Badgerys Creek Airport, for example. Okay, so I'm trying to think the name of the tunnel, the East-West Tunnel in Sydney. So those sorts of projects, they take years to actually build. So they will keep on going for quite some time. because they've already started. So those ones will keep going, and they will keep jobs alive and happening for the foreseeable future. But I don't see many huge ones coming, with one minor exception, and that would be anything related to enabling the Olympics. Okay, so there's going to be a whole bunch of major infrastructure spending happen in southeast Queensland in particular, and that's where I see the bulk of the infrastructure being spent over the next, I guess, 12 to 24 months is launching projects that are in and around that space. Okay, trying to see who else is coming through. Brad Anderson, hi Declan. Oh, so he's replying to Declan. I'll let that go. John says, John is listing a couple of properties answering Lynn's question, so that's great. And Johan is saying, great info session, Rob. Wealth of knowledge for being dispensed. Thank you, mate. Thank you. I'll give that a little bit of love. Hoping that comes through as a little bit of love. Yes, it does. John says, what's your opinion on the possibility of negative interest rates? Is this actually possible? Oh, I'm going to cover this quite a bit on the weekend, John. Is it possible? The answer is categorically yes, it is absolutely possible. As a matter of fact, APRA have given a mandate to the banks to prepare for the possibility of negative interest rates. Now, that doesn't mean that there's going to be negative interest rates. That's just them preparing, because as things expand and contract with regards to, I guess, more cases and lockdowns and more opens and more lockdowns, there's only two ways that the government can actually stimulate the economy. One is lower the interest rates. The other one is print money. Now, we can't lower the interest rates much lower. We're at 0.1%. And as I just touched on before, we have printed so much money, it's not possible. It's not funny. So if we need to reignite the economy again, we don't have much choice but to go into negative territory. Okay. Now, there's plenty of examples of other countries going into negative interest rates. So it is absolutely categorically possible. And if it does, then you watch the property prices boom at that point, because you'll be getting paid in order to take debt. And so everybody will be wanting to get into assets. Going to go into that in a lot more detail on the weekend at the Escape Velocity event, mate. So once again, if you have not yet registered, this is the link for that. Okay, we're pretty much an hour in, folks, and looks like most of my questions have started to dry up. So I want to thank you all very much for your commentary. If this was popular, and I suspect by the number of questions that it was and the number of people still online that it was, then I guess put your commentary and your love in there, and we might do this as a regular event and try and give you some insights and love and all that sort of thing. That said, I'm going to sign off for now. So thank you very much, folks. It's been great, and I'm going to catch you on the weekend at the Escape Velocity weekend. After that, we've got our 9th birthday coming up. Don't forget, I'm giving away a 12-month education program in that, so property development formula program. So if you want to get in that, look for all of the promos that we've been doing, where we're looking for your feedback as to how we're doing as a community. So you do that, and you're in a chance to win. So other than that, folks, I'm going to sign off for now. So it's good night from me, and it's good night from him. Bye, guys.